the maid confronted the vampire king's cruel consort. Her reaction to what she saw left the king completely speechless. Your servant. A human servant. Worthless. Celine Varkos yanked viciously at Leora's apron, her crimson nails piercing the worn fabric like claws. Your pathetic charge ruined my enchanted gown with her clumsy human filth. The crystal vial rolled across the obsidian floor, trailing glittering frost powder in its wake. Lady Mirren trembled against the carved wall, her small hands pressed to her mouth as tears froze on her cheeks. She was only 6 years old, too young to understand the fury of immortal vanity. Please, Lady Celine, it was an accident. Leora struggled against the consort's iron grip, but Celine had her pinned against the velvet settee, her supernatural strength crushing the breath from Leora's lungs. Mirren is just a child. I don't care if she's an infant. Celine's eyes flickered crimson, pupils narrowing to reptilian slits. Someone needs to teach this little worm what happens when you disrespect your betters. She raised her hand toward the girl, claws extending from her fingertips like polished daggers. The child screamed. Leora didn't think. Her body moved on pure protective instinct, the same force that had kept her surviving in this palace of monsters for 3 brutal years. She threw herself between Mirren and those descending claws, taking the strike across her face. The crack echoed through the moonlit ballroom like shattering ice. What in the blood-soaked hells is happening here? Draven Ulrich's voice cut through the frozen air like a blade. Thank you for sticking around with me, my wonderful story family. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. He stood in the arched doorway, his cloak still billowing from his entrance. The ancient vampire king processed the scene before him with predatory stillness. His consort, hands still raised, fangs bared. Leora Vale, blood streaming from her temple. Mirren whimpering in the corner, her dress stained with spilled powder. The 3 royal guards, Kale, Marcus, Eldrick, frozen mid-step, hands on their sword hilts. And Leora's eyes. Those strange, defiant human eyes that blazed with something no maid should possess. The room fell into suffocating silence. Draven, my beloved, you've returned early. Celine's expression transformed instantly, melting into wounded innocence. This creature disrespected me. Her charge destroyed my ceremonial gown, the one woven with moon silk worth a king's ransom. Draven's gaze didn't move from Leora, who now held Mirren protectively behind her despite the blood dripping down her jaw. The maid's lip was beginning to swell. There were claw marks blooming across her cheek, like crimson flowers. Leora. His voice was dangerously soft. Are you unharmed? Yes, your majesty. Leora's voice was barely a whisper, but it didn't shake. It never shook, and that had always unnerved him. You're asking her? Celine let out a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. I'm the one who was assaulted by her incompetence. I saw what you did. Draven's words were winter itself. I saw you strike her. I was merely disciplining an insolent servant. Disciplining. Draven took a single step toward his consort, and the temperature in the ballroom plummeted. His hands trembled with suppressed fury, a terrible sign in a creature who'd lived for 8 centuries. You believe striking someone is discipline? A tiny hiccup came from Mirren's hiding place behind her protector. The small, broken sound seemed to shatter something inside the vampire king. He crouched down to the child's level, his voice softening in a way few had ever heard. Lady Mirren, are you hurt? The girl shook her head, but her eyes were still wide with terror. She looked at Celine as if the consort were a creature from the Deadlands. Draven, you cannot be serious. Celine touched his arm with possessive fingers. She's just a human and her sniveling charge. I'm your consort. You're chosen. He recoiled from her touch, as if it burned. Get out of my palace. The command hung in the air like a death sentence. What? Get out of my palace. Each word was carved from ice.
Now.
You can't banish me for this one. Celine pointed at Leora with pure venom. For this starving little wretch who probably planned the whole thing. That woman has more honor in one fingernail than you have possessed in 300 years of existence. Draven gestured to the doors, and they swung open with a boom that rattled the frost chandeliers.
Leave.
Before I have the guards remove you in chains. You're going to regret this. Celine snatched her jeweled cloak from a nearby chair, her beauty twisting into something monstrous. No one will ever worship you as I have. And when you realize what you've lost, it will be far too late. My only regret, Draven said quietly, is not seeing your true nature centuries ago. Celine stormed out, her exit so violent the ancient doors shuddered in their frames. The silence that followed felt heavier than stone. Leora was the first to move, lowering herself into a shaking curtsy. Your Majesty, I'm so sorry. I'll submit my resignation at dawn. Mirren and I will be gone before.
No.
Draven approached her slowly, carefully, as if approaching a wounded animal that might flee. Let me see your face. I'm fine. You're bleeding. He produced a black silk handkerchief from his coat and pressed it gently against the wound on her temple. Lady Mirren, would you fetch ice from the kitchens? Asked the head cook. The girl looked to her protector for permission. Leora nodded, and Mirren ran from the ballroom, her footsteps echoing. How long? The question caught Leora off guard. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. How long has she been doing this to you? Draven's silver eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. Leora looked down at the blood-stained floor. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. He lifted her chin gently, so gently for a creature capable of tearing through stone. How long, Leora? For months. The confession escaped like a dying breath. Since the day you brought her to live in the palace. Mirren returned with an ice bundle wrapped in linen. Draven took it and carefully pressed it to Leora's swelling lip, his touch impossibly tender. Why didn't you report this to anyone? I need this position. Tears finally broke through Leora's composure, tracing paths through the dried blood on her cheeks. Mirren needs her education in the court school. The human quarters outside the palace are... I couldn't risk losing this. I couldn't risk her. Miss Leora, don't cry. Mirren wrapped her arms around her guardian's waist. The mean vampire lady is gone now. Draven felt something crack in his ancient, carefully guarded chest. This human woman had endured months of torture to protect a child's future. And he, the all-seeing vampire king, had been completely, unforgivably blind. Leora Vale. He waited until she met his eyes. Listen to me very carefully. No one, vampire, noble, or creature of darkness, will touch you or Lady Mirren again while you serve in this palace. I give you my blood oath. But, Your Majesty, no arguments. His voice was gentle. We'll discuss improved conditions for you and the other human staff tomorrow. For tonight, I want you both to rest. He glanced at Mirren. Have you eaten? The child shook her head, then looked at Leora with hopeful eyes. Then we'll have the kitchen send supper to your quarters. Something warm. Something comforting. Leora was too exhausted, too emotionally shattered, to protest. As Draven escorted them toward the servants' wing, an action that would itself become palace legend, he couldn't stop replaying the image of Leora throwing herself between Celine's claws and the child. In that single moment of pure courage, he had seen something his cruel consort had never possessed. A heart worth more than all the blood in his kingdom. Leora didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Celine's claws reaching for Mirren, felt the sting of that strike across her face, heard the king's voice saying words that made no sense. You are under my protection. At dawn, she rose and began packing the few belongings she and Mirren owned. Where are we going? Mirren appeared in the doorway of their small chamber, rubbing sleep from her eyes. To find another position, little one. But why? The king was nice. He gave us soup and bread and even honey cakes. Before Leora could answer, Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Draven Ulrich appeared, dressed not in his royal regalia, but in a simple black tunic and trousers. He looked as if he hadn't slept much either. Shadows lingered beneath those silver eyes. "Good morning." His voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Leora, may we speak?" "I was writing my resignation, Your Majesty." "Please don't." He glanced at the partially packed trunk, then at the child. "Lady Mirren, would you mind visiting the kitchens for breakfast? I believe Cook mentioned fresh berry tarts. Your guardian and I need to discuss matters of employment." Mirren looked at Leora. The maid nodded, and the girls scampered off, clearly enticed by the promise of sweets. "Your Majesty, I cannot stay after what transpired." "Why not? Why not?" Leora set down the worn leather satchel she'd been folding Mirren's spare dress into. The question hung in the pre-dawn air between them, simple words that carried the weight of impossible expectations. "Because I'm a liability now, Your Majesty." She kept her voice steady, her hands busy with packing. Anything to avoid looking at him directly. "Lady Selene has powerful allies among the noble houses. They'll whisper that I seduced you, that I manipulated last night's events, that I'm dangerous." "You think I care what they whisper? I think you're a king." Leora finally met his eyes. "And kings must care about politics, alliances, and appearances. I'm just a maid who caused you to banish your consort. The court will never forgive that. Neither will she." Draven stepped further into the small chamber, his presence filling the cramped space. "What if I told you that I'm more concerned about the truth than about court gossip? Then I'd say you're lying to spare my feelings, Your Majesty." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. She'd never spoken to him with such bluntness before. "There's that defiance again. The same fire I saw when you faced Selene's claws." He gestured to the simple wooden chair beside her narrow bed. "May I sit? This conversation feels too important for formality." Leora nodded, bewildered. The Vampire King, ancient ruler of Nocturnix, sat in her servant's chair as if it were his throne. "Tell me honestly, Leora Vale, how long has Selene been tormenting you? And I want the truth. All of it." The gentleness in his voice nearly broke her. "For months," she whispered. "Since the week you brought her to the palace as your intended consort." "What did she do?" Leora's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of her packed trunk. "At first, just words. She'd find me in the corridors and remind me that I was human filth, that I existed only because you permitted it, that I should be grateful to scrub floors for immortals." Draven's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "Then she began testing me. She'd knock tea trays from my hands and demand I clean it before the stain set. She'd accidentally step on my skirts in the throne room, tearing them. She'd reassign my duties at the last moment, ensuring I'd fail to complete them and face punishment." "Why didn't you report this to the head of staff?" Leora laughed, a brittle, hopeless sound. "Because she is friends with the head of staff, Your Majesty. Madame Thorne despises humans as much as Selene does. Any complaint would have been dismissed as insolence." Draven stood abruptly, pacing the small room like a caged predator. "I should have seen this. I should have." He stopped, running a hand through his silver-white hair. "What else?" "She began hurting me physically about 6 weeks ago, pinching my arms where the uniform would cover the bruises, pulling my hair when no one was watching. Once, she pushed me down the servants' stairs and told the guards I'd tripped. Gods below." The curse escaped him like a prayer. But the worst part, Leora's voice finally cracked. The worst part was when she started targeting Mirren. She'd corner her in empty hallways, whisper terrible things about what happens to human children who displease vampires. Mirren has had nightmares for weeks. The confession hung between them like smoke. Draven returned to the chair, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. When he spoke, his voice was rough with something that sounded like guilt. "I was blind. Completely, unforgivably blind. I ignored the signs because I wanted to believe Selene was..." He stopped. "It doesn't matter what I wanted to believe. I failed you. I failed Mirren. I failed every human in this palace. You didn't know. I should have known. His silver eyes met hers with raw intensity. A king who doesn't see his people suffering is no king at all. A knock at the door interrupted them. Enter, Draven called. 3 guards stepped inside, the same 3 who'd witnessed last night's confrontation. Leora recognized them. Cale Thorn, the stern captain with the scarred jaw, Marcus Varen, younger and softer-featured, and Eldric Soren, whose dark eyes held an unusual kindness. Your Majesty, Cale bowed. We came to check on Miss Vale's well-being. And to offer our testimony, Marcus added, glancing at Leora. If there's to be an inquiry about last night, we'll speak truthfully about what we witnessed. Eldric nodded. Celine Varkos struck first. Miss Vale acted only in defense of the child. That's what we'll tell the court, blood oath and all. Leora felt tears prick her eyes. These guards had no reason to help her, yet here they stood, offering their reputations as shields. Draven stood. There will be no inquiry. What happened last night was witnessed by guards, confirmed by testimony, and resulted in appropriate consequences. His voice carried command. But there will be changes. Cale, I want a full review of working conditions for human staff. Marcus, arrange a meeting with the human servants. I'll hear their grievances directly. Eldric, you'll serve as liaison between the guard and the human quarters. Make sure they know they can report abuse without fear. All 3 guards saluted. And Leora, Draven turned to her. You're not resigning. You're being promoted. As of this moment, you're under direct royal protection. Any vampire who threatens you answers to me personally. Your Majesty, I can't. You can and you will. Consider it in order. His expression softened slightly. Unless you truly wish to leave, I won't force you to stay if you're afraid. Leora looked at Mirren, who'd crept to the doorway and was watching with wide, hopeful eyes. She thought of the other human servants who suffered in silence. She thought of what it meant to run versus what it meant to stay and fight. I'll stay, she whispered. For Mirren. For the others.
Good.
Draven nodded to the guards.
Dismissed.
And Cale, have someone watch the perimeter. I don't trust that Celine left quietly. The guards departed, leaving Leora and Draven alone once more. You should rest, he said gently. Last night was traumatic. So should you, Your Majesty. You look exhausted. That ghost of a smile returned. Still worried about me, even after everything. Old habits, Leora murmured. As Draven moved toward the door, he paused. Leora? Thank you. For what? For being brave enough to protect a child when I was too blind to see the monster in my own palace. Then he was gone, leaving Leora alone with a strange, terrifying sensation that her entire world had just shifted on its axis. Outside, hidden in the shadows of the palace's eastern tower, Celine Varkos watched the vampire king exit the servants' quarters. Her crimson eyes burned with hatred so pure it could have ignited stone. Enjoy your little victory, Maid, she whispered to the darkness. You've made a powerful enemy, and before I'm done, you'll wish you'd let me strike that pathetic child. Her claws extended, carving deep gouges into the ancient stone wall. This isn't over. It's barely begun. The first strike came 3 days after Celine's banishment. Leora arrived at her quarters after evening duties to find Madame Thorn waiting outside her door, flanked by 2 palace administrators. The head of staff's expression was carved from ice. Leora Vale, you are hereby accused of theft. Madame Thorn's voice rang through the corridor, loud enough to draw other servants from their chambers. A set of enchanted silver candlesticks has gone missing from the Eastern Gallery. They were last seen in your care. I never touched those candlesticks, Leora said carefully. I wasn't assigned to the Eastern Gallery this week. The duty roster says otherwise. One of the administrators produced a scroll, pointing to a line of elegant script.
See?
Your name, clear as moonlight. Leora's blood chilled. That wasn't her assignment. Someone had altered the records. Search her quarters, Madame Thorn commanded. They found the candlesticks within minutes, wrapped in Leora's spare apron, hidden beneath her mattress. The servants watching from doorways gasped and whispered. I didn't take those, Leora insisted, even as panic clawed at her throat. Someone planted them. This is... excuses. Madame Thorne's smile was sharp as a blade. Perhaps your new royal protection has made you bold enough to steal from your betters. I want to speak to His Majesty. The king has more important matters than a thieving maid's protests. You'll be confined to quarters pending formal judgment. Madame Thorne gestured to the guards, not Cale, Marcus, or Eldrick, but two vampires Leora didn't recognize. Take her inside. Bar the door. As they shoved her into her chamber, Leora glimpsed Mirren being led away by another servant, tears streaming down her face. The door slammed. A lock clicked. Leora sank onto her bed, trembling with fury and fear. Then she pulled out the worn journal sheet hidden in the floorboards and began writing. Day 3 after confrontation. Candlesticks planted. Duty roster forged. Madame Thorne involved. Witnesses present. Calculated humiliation. She'd started documenting everything the day after Draven's promise of protection. Some instinct told her this was only the beginning. The accusations multiplied like poison spreading through water. By the end of the week, Leora faced reports of torn linens found in her quarters, expensive silk sheets ripped to ribbons, evidence of her destroying palace property in jealous rage. Altered inventory logs suggesting she'd been stealing food to sell in the human quarters. Whispered rumors that she'd been seen entering the guards' barracks after dark, seducing the very men who'd defended her. Each incident was carefully orchestrated. Each piece of evidence is perfectly placed. Each rumor was calculated to destroy her credibility. Leora documented everything in her hidden journal, noting times, witnesses, inconsistencies. She sketched the placement of the torn linens. They'd been arranged too perfectly, as if staged. She recorded exact quotes from accusers, noticing how their stories matched word for word, as if rehearsed. But documentation couldn't stop exhaustion. She slept barely 3 hours a night, torn between maintaining her duties, defending herself against accusations, and comforting Mirren, who'd grown pale and silent since the attacks began. You look half dead. Leora startled, nearly dropping the stack of folded tablecloths she was carrying through the corridor. Draven stood in the shadows near the servants' stairwell, an odd place for a king. Your Majesty. She curtsied awkwardly, arms full of fabric. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. He stepped closer, and she saw concern etched in his features. You have shadows under your eyes deep enough to drown in. When did you last sleep properly? I sleep enough. Leora. His voice softened. What's happening? And don't tell me nothing. I can see something is wrong. She hesitated. The accusations were under investigation, officially, but she knew how palace politics worked. Draven's protection only extended so far when the entire vampire elite seemed determined to destroy her. There have been incidents, she said carefully. Nothing I can't handle. What kind of incidents? Before she could answer, Mirren came running down the corridor, her face streaked with tears. The child threw herself at Leora, nearly knocking the tablecloths to the floor. Miss Leora, I'm scared. She was here again. Leora's heart stopped. Who was here? Mirren who? The mean vampire lady. Lady Selene. Mirren's voice was barely a whisper. She found me in the library. She said she's going to make sure you disappear. She said accidents happen to little girls who tell secrets. Draven went absolutely still. When he spoke, his voice was death itself. Selene was in the palace? She wore a hood, Mirren whimpered. But I saw her eyes. The red ones. She grabbed my arm and said terrible things. Show me. Draven commanded gently. Mirren rolled up her sleeve. Finger-shaped bruises marked her small arm, 4 purple marks where claws had pressed too hard. Something cracked in Draven's carefully controlled expression. Mirren, I need you to tell me exactly what else she said. Every word you remember. The child recounted threats whispered in shadows, promises of pain, warnings about speaking to guards, threats that Leora would be gone soon, and then Mirren would be all alone with the monsters. By the time she finished, Draven was shaking with rage. "This ends now," he said quietly. He looked at Leora. "I want every detail of every incident that's occurred since Selene left. Everything. Write it down and bring it to my study within the hour." "Your Majesty, I don't want a burden." "It's not a burden. It's my duty." His eyes blazed silver. "Someone is waging war against you, and I will not allow it." Within the hour, palace guards began noticing inconsistencies. Kale discovered that the duty roster had been altered with illusion magic. Beneath the false writing, Leora's name appeared nowhere near the Eastern Gallery assignments. Marcus found a merchant who'd sold the stolen candlesticks to a hooded woman matching Celine's description days before they went missing from the palace. Eldrick interviewed servants who'd witnessed the accusations. Under gentle questioning, 3 admitted they'd been paid in silver to remember seeing Leora in compromising positions. The web of lies began unraveling. But in the High Council chambers, Celine's influence ran deeper than anyone realized. Lord Vareth, an ancient vampire whose family had served Nocturnix for millennia, stood before the assembled nobles. His voice carried the weight of tradition. "I formally petition for the immediate punishment of the human servant Leora Vale. The evidence of theft, destruction of property, and moral corruption is overwhelming. She has proven herself a danger to palace order." 3 other council members voiced agreement, all known allies of Celine's family. "The girl should be exiled to the Deadlands," Lady Corvina added, her voice dripping venom. "Or executed as an example to other humans who forget their place." The vote was called. The motion passed, 5-3. The council demanded Leora's punishment. All they needed now was the king's approval. And outside the council chambers, hidden behind an illusion spell that bent light like water, Selene Varkos smiled. "Your move, Your Majesty," she whispered into the darkness. "Protect your little pet and lose your council. Abandon her and lose yourself. Either way, I win." Cale Thorne found the king in the throne room at midnight, standing before the massive obsidian seat he rarely occupied. Draven's silhouette was carved from shadow and moonlight filtering through the vaulted windows. "Your Majesty, we need to talk about Selene Varkos." Draven didn't turn. "The council has demanded Leora's punishment. They want her exiled to the Deadlands within a fortnight. The council is being manipulated." Cale's voice was steady, factual. "Every accusation against Miss Vale has been fabricated. We've found proof, altered records, paid witnesses, planted evidence. This isn't random persecution, Your Majesty. It's a campaign." "I know." Draven's words were barely audible. "The question is, what else don't I know?" Cale moved closer. "Permission to speak freely?" "Always." Something about Selene never sat right with me. The way servants flinched when she passed. The way human children started disappearing from court gatherings after she arrived. Small things that seemed insignificant alone, but together. He paused. "Your Majesty, I think there's something darker happening here than jealousy or wounded pride." Draven finally turned, his silver eyes reflecting the moonlight like mirrors. "You want to investigate my former consort?" "Yes. If you find what I suspect you'll find, it will shatter alliances that took centuries to build. Celine's family has influence that reaches into every noble house in Nocturnix. And if we don't investigate, an innocent woman dies." Cale met his king's gaze without flinching. "Possibly more than one." Draven was silent for a long moment. Then, "You have my permission. Discreet, thorough, and fast. Take Marcus and Eldrick. Trust no one else. If Selene has corrupted the council, she may have corrupted the guard as well." "What about Miss Vale? Should we inform her? Keep her protected but uninformed for now. If Selene's spies report that Leora knows about the investigation, they'll accelerate whatever endgame they're planning." Draven's expression hardened. "And Cale? There's something else you should know about Leora Vale." "Sir? She's immune to vampiric compulsion. Completely immune." I tested it myself when I questioned her about the accusations. No vampire should be able to resist our influence the way she does. Kale's eyes widened. That's impossible, unless she carries bloodline magic we don't understand, which makes her either very valuable or very dangerous, depending on who's asking. Draven moved toward the throne room exit. Find out what Celine wanted with her. Find out why she's so desperate to destroy this particular human. And if the answer is worse than we imagined, then we prepare for war. The investigation began in the palace's forgotten places. Marcus discovered the first anomaly in the Western Tower, a corridor that appeared on ancient architectural plans but seemed to vanish in the current structure. When he pressed certain stones in sequence, a hidden door clicked open, revealing a staircase spiraling down into darkness. Kale, you need to see this. The three guards descended with enchanted torches, the flames casting dancing shadows on walls that hadn't seen light in decades. The air grew colder with each step, and a strange metallic scent filled their lungs. At the bottom, they found a chamber. The walls were carved with runes none of them recognized, ancient symbols that seemed to writhe in the torchlight. In the center stood a stone altar stained with something dark and old. Around it, scattered like offerings, were small objects, a child's shoe, a torn doll, a boy's wooden sword. Gods below, Eldrick whispered. Marcus knelt beside the altar, examining markings in the stone. These runes are for life force extraction. Vampires don't need these. We feed naturally. This is... He looked up, horror dawning. This is ritual magic, the kind that drains vitality to fuel preservation spells. Beauty spells, Kale realized, his voice hollow. She was draining children to maintain her appearance. They found 3 more chambers in the following nights. Each contained similar altars, similar runes, similar remnants of young lives interrupted. In one, they discovered journals written in Celine's elegant hand, documenting decades of rituals performed in secret. The Veil-born girl resists too strongly. One entry read, "Her blood rejects the compulsion. She must be eliminated before she discovers her true nature. The king must never learn what she could become." Veil-born, Marcus read over Kale's shoulder. What does that mean? I don't know. But Miss Veil needs to be warned now. Leora felt the eyes on her constantly now. In corridors, she'd catch glimpses of hooded figures that vanished when she turned. Shadows moved wrong in doorways. Whispers died the moment she approached. Mirren felt it too. The child refused to leave Leora's side, even sleeping in her guardian's narrow bed rather than the small cot in the corner. Miss Leora, why do the walls feel angry? What do you mean, little one? Like they're watching us. Like they want to hurt us. Leora had no answer. She only held the child tighter and prayed to gods she wasn't sure existed anymore. One evening, returning from the kitchens with Mirren's supper, Leora heard footsteps behind her. When she turned, the corridor was empty. But on the wall where someone had just stood, fresh claw marks scored the stone, for parallel lines, deliberate as a signature. A warning. Leora began taking different routes each day, varying her schedule, never walking the same corridor twice in succession. She taught Mirren to memorize the guards' faces, to run to Kale or Marcus or Eldrick if anything frightened her. But the feeling of being hunted never left. Draven received Kale's report in his private study, and with each revelation, his expression grew darker. How many children? His voice was barely controlled. We've found evidence of at least 17 over the past 3 years. All human. All from families without significant palace influence. And Leora? According to Celine's journals, Miss Veil is something called Veil-born. Her bloodline makes her immune to vampiric manipulation. Celine feared her, genuinely feared her, which is why she tried to break her through physical and psychological torture. Draven stood, pacing to the window. Beyond the glass, Nocturnix sprawled in moonlit darkness, his kingdom, his responsibility, his blindness made manifest. We need to tell her, he said finally. She deserves to know what she's facing. The council votes on her exile in 3 days. Then we have 3 days to expose the truth, whatever it costs. It happened during the council's preliminary hearing. Leora stood in the marble-floored chamber, flanked by guards she didn't know, facing a semicircle of ancient vampires who looked at her like something to be scraped off their boots. Lord Vareth was speaking, droning about theft and corruption and the sanctity of palace order, when Lady Corvina decided to demonstrate Leora's insolence. "Look at me, human," Corvina commanded, her voice laced with compulsion magic that hit like a physical wave. Leora's vision blurred. Her knees buckled. But instead of bowing, instead of meeting the vampire's eyes in helpless obedience, something inside her pushed back. Light erupted from her skin, pale, shimmering, like moonlight made solid. Corvina recoiled with a hiss. The other council members rose from their seats, and Leora collapsed, blood trickling from her nose, glowing faintly silver in the torchlight. She woke in the palace infirmary, surrounded by white linen and the scent of medicinal herbs. Draven sat beside her bed, his expression carved from worry and wonder. "What happened?" Her voice was rough, throat burning. "You resisted a compulsion spell so violently it backfired on the caster. Lady Corvina is still recovering." Draven's tone carried something between awe and fear. "Leora, the healers found something in your blood. Ancient markers. A genetic signature that hasn't been seen in Nocturnix for over 3 centuries. I don't understand. You're Veilborn." He said it like a prophecy, like a curse, like a miracle. "Your ancestors were humans who developed natural immunity to vampiric domination. They were protectors, guardians, bridgewalkers between our species. Most were hunted to extinction during the Blood Wars because they threatened vampire supremacy." Leora's hand trembled as she touched her temple, where dried silver-tinged blood flaked against her skin. "That's why Celine hated me. Not because I was human, but because I was immune to her power." "Yes." Draven leaned forward, his silver eyes intense. "She couldn't compel you, couldn't break you through fear, couldn't make you submit the way she'd controlled countless others. You were a threat to everything she'd built. What does this mean for me? It means you're far more important than either of us realized. The Veilborn were said to possess other abilities, the power to break enchantments, to sense blood magic, to shield others from compulsion. If you carry even a fraction of that potential, I'm a target." Leora finished the thought, her voice hollow. "A bigger target than before." "Yes." Draven took her hand gently. "But you're also under my protection. And now that I know what you are, I understand why that protection must be absolute." A soft knock interrupted them. Kale entered, his expression grim. "Your Majesty, we have a problem. Word of Miss Vale's display in the council chamber has spread. Celine knows." Draven cursed.
How?
Lord Vareth sent a messenger to her exile location within the hour. The message was intercepted, but Kale hesitated. "She knows Miss Vale is Veilborn. And according to our spies, she's already left the location where she was supposed to remain." Leora felt ice flood her veins. "Mirren. Where's Mirren?" "Safe in your quarters with Marcus and—" The explosion echoed through the palace like thunder. They found Marcus unconscious outside Leora's chamber, a dart protruding from his neck. The door hung open. Inside, furniture was overturned, Leora's journal lay torn and scattered, and Mirren was gone. On the wall, written in what looked like blood, was a message. "The Deadlands. Midnight tomorrow. Come alone, Veilborn, or the child feeds the ritual." Leora's scream tore through the palace. The next 12 hours descended into chaos. Celine's agents moved with precision, striking at every vulnerability they'd identified over months of surveillance. Palace scribes were found murdered, their blood used to forge royal decrees that painted Leora as a spy working for rival kingdoms. Evidence appeared suggesting Leora had been passing palace secrets to human resistance groups planning revolution. 3 witnesses came forward, clearly coached, clearly terrified, claiming they'd seen Leora perform forbidden magic in the servants' quarters. The council reconvened in an emergency session. This time, they didn't demand exile. They demanded execution. The human has revealed herself as a weapon, Lord Vareth declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. A Veilborn who has already attacked Lady Corvina with her unnatural powers. She must be destroyed before she becomes a rallying point for human uprising. She defended herself against compulsion. Draven countered, his fury barely contained. That is not a crime. It is a threat to vampire sovereignty. Lady Corvina spat, still pale from the magical backlash. The Veilborn were exterminated for a reason, Your Majesty. They were abominations that disrupted the natural order. The council votes, Lord Vareth announced. All in favor of immediate execution for the human Leora Vale? 6 hands rose. Draven's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. I refuse. Silence fell, heavy as stone. Your Majesty, Vareth said carefully, the council's vote is binding in matters of palace security. Not when I invoke crown right. Draven stood, and every vampire in the room felt the weight of his ancient power press against them. I am declaring Leora Vale under direct royal protection by blood oath. Any who harm her answer to me personally, and I will invoke trial by combat for her life. The chamber erupted into chaos. Voices rose in protest, in shock, in fury. You would risk civil war for a human? Corvina shrieked. I would risk everything for justice. Draven's eyes blazed silver fire. This council has been manipulated by Selene Varkos, a vampire who used blood magic to drain children for her vanity, who has kidnapped a 6-year-old girl to force a confrontation, who has corrupted every institution meant to protect the innocent. He moved through the chamber, his presence forcing the nobles back like a tide. You want to execute Leora Vale because she threatens your power, because she represents humans who cannot be controlled, cannot be compelled, cannot be broken by fear. His voice dropped to something deadly. That terrifies you more than any army. Your Majesty, I am done listening to this council until it can prove it serves Nocturnix rather than serving its own prejudice. This session is over. Draven turned and walked out, leaving shocked silence in his wake. In the corridor, Leora waited, guarded by Kale and Eldrick. When she saw Draven's expression, she knew. They want me dead. They won't have you. He stopped before her, and for the first time since she'd known him, the Vampire King looked truly shaken. Leora, I need to tell you something. The blood oath I just swore, it binds my life to yours. If you die, part of my essence dies with you. It's the strongest protection I can offer. Why would you do that? Draven's expression softened. Because you're worth protecting. Because you saved a child when no one else would. Because you're the best person in this entire cursed palace. He paused. And because we're going to get Mirren back. Tonight. The message said to come alone. We're not playing by Selene's rules anymore. The hidden chamber beneath the western tower smelled of death and old magic. Kale held the torch higher, illuminating walls covered in ritual markings that seemed to pulse with faint, sickly light. In the center of the room stood an ornate mirror, taller than a man, its frame carved with faces frozen in silent screams. Gods have mercy, Eldrick whispered. Marcus approached the mirror carefully, his reflection distorting in the ancient glass. But it wasn't just his reflection. There were others. Faint, ghostly images of children, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow. Some he recognized from court gatherings years past. Others were strangers. The mirror traps their life force, Marcus said, his voice shaking. She feeds from it like a parasite. This is how she maintained her beauty for centuries without aging. Not through natural vampire longevity, but through stolen vitality. Kale examined the altar beside the mirror. Scattered across its surface were personal items, a lock of hair, a child's drawing a small shoe. And there, near the edge, a torn piece of pink fabric. From Mirren's dress. She's planning to use the girl in the final ritual. Kale's jaw tightened. Tonight. That's what the message meant. Mirren isn't just fate. She's the sacrifice. They found documentation hidden in a locked cabinet, journals spanning decades, detailing each ritual, each child, each feeding. Celine's elegant handwriting described the process with clinical detachment, how long each child's essence lasted, which bloodlines produced the strongest vitality, and how to suppress their screams with silencing spells. And near the end of the most recent journal, an entry dated 2 weeks before Leora's confrontation with Celine. The Veilborn Maid is becoming problematic. Her immunity disrupts my compulsions, and the king watches her with growing interest. She must be destroyed before she realizes her potential. The child she protects would make an excellent final offering. The fear and despair of someone with Veilborn blood will amplify the ritual tenfold. Then I will be beautiful forever, and no one will dare question my place beside the throne. Aldrich photographed every page with a memory crystal, magical evidence that couldn't be dismissed or altered. When they emerged from the chamber, dawn was breaking over Nocturnix. "We need to show this to Miss Vale," Marcus said. "She'll blame herself," Cale replied grimly. "She'll think Mirren was targeted because of her. She already blames herself. She deserves the truth." They found Leora in Draven's study, pacing like a caged animal while the king reviewed maps of the Deadlands. When she saw the guards' expressions, she knew they'd found something terrible. "Tell me." Cale handed her the memory crystal. "This will show you what we discovered. But Miss Vale, you need to prepare yourself. Just show me." The crystal projected images into the air, the chamber, the mirror, the ghostly faces of children trapped in glass. Celine's journals appeared next, passages floating like accusations. The youngest produced the sweetest vitality. Silencing spells prevent the parents from hearing. The Veilborn child will be the crowning achievement. Leora watched it all. When the projection ended, she collapsed into a chair, her face drained of color. "She wanted Mirren because of me." Her voice was barely audible. "All those children died because she wanted power, and now Mirren is going to die because I—" "No." Draven knelt before her, taking her trembling hands. "Celine killed those children because she's a monster. You are not responsible for her evil. You couldn't have known." "I should have seen. Neither of us saw." His grip tightened. "But we see now, and we're going to stop her. Tonight." Leora looked up, tears streaming down her face.
How?
"She has Mirren. If we attack directly, she'll kill her immediately." "We won't attack directly." Draven stood, his expression hardening into something ruthless. "We're going to give Celine exactly what she wants, a public stage for her final victory." The announcement went out within hours. His Majesty King Draven Ulrich cordially invites the noble houses of Nocturnix to a grand masquerade in honor of Lady Celine Varkos, whose contributions to the realm have been unjustly overlooked. All grievances shall be heard. All accusations shall be answered. Justice shall be served. The message was carefully worded, an apparent capitulation that would appeal to Celine's ego while providing legal grounds for a formal trial. "She'll suspect a trap," Cale warned. "Of course she will," Draven replied. "But she won't be able to resist. Her pride won't let her. She'll see it as her chance to humiliate me publicly, to force me to acknowledge her power." He looked at the memory crystal containing all the evidence. "And we'll use that pride to destroy her." Leora studied the invitation. "When?" "Tomorrow night. We don't have time for anything more elaborate. The ritual she's planning will drain Mirren completely if we wait longer." "What if she doesn't bring Mirren?" "She will." Draven's voice was certain. "She'll want you to see the child suffer. It's part of her revenge." Marcus entered the study, breathing hard. "Your Majesty, we have a problem. Celine's spies just reported back to her about the investigation. She knows we found the chambers." Draven cursed. "When?" 10 minutes ago. "And according to our counterintelligence, she's already begun accelerating the ritual preparations. She's moving the timeline up." "How long do we have?" "Based on the ritual requirements? 36 hours. Maybe less." The room fell silent as the reality settled over them. They'd intended to prepare carefully, gather allies, and ensure every legal measure was in place. Now they have barely a day. Then we move faster. Draven turned to his guards. Kale, send invitations to every noble house. Make it clear attendance is mandatory. Marcus, prepare the grand ballroom and ensure our loyalists are positioned strategically. Eldrick, gather witnesses who can testify about Celine's crimes. Servants, healers, anyone who noticed the children disappearing. What about me? Leora asked. Draven met her eyes. You're going to help me plan the most important performance of my very long life. Because tomorrow night, we're not just saving Mirren, we're putting Celine Varkos on trial before the entire vampire court. He moved to the window, looking out over his kingdom. And when we're done, everyone will know exactly what kind of monster wore the title of royal consort. In her hidden sanctuary miles away, Celine stood before the ritual mirror, Mirren bound and sobbing at her feet. The child's face was already pale, her vitality slowly draining through the preliminary spells. So the king wants a masquerade, Celine murmured, reading the invitation her spy had delivered. He thinks he can humiliate me in front of the court. She smiled, her reflection in the mirror showing something ancient and hungry. Perfect. Let him gather all his precious nobles in one place. When I complete the ritual and emerge with the full power of Veilborn essence, I'll show them all what true power looks like. She looked down at Mirren, who whimpered. Don't worry, little one. Your suffering will be brief. And when your guardian comes to save you. Celine's claws extended.
Well,
that's when the real performance begins. The grand ballroom glittered like a frozen dream. Frost chandeliers cast prismatic light across hundreds of masked nobles dressed in silk and jewels. Musicians played haunting melodies while servants, carefully selected loyalists, moved through the crowd with crystal goblets of blood wine. The masquerade was a spectacle of beauty and power, exactly as Nocturnix's elite expected. And in the center of it all, Celine Varkos stood radiant in crimson velvet, her mask adorned with rubies that caught the light like drops of blood. She'd arrived fashionably late, making an entrance that turned every head. Beside her, held by an enchanted leash invisible to mortal eyes, stood Mirren, pale, trembling, but alive. Your Majesty. Celine curtsied before Draven's throne with theatrical grace. How generous of you to acknowledge my contributions to your reign. I've brought a guest, as requested. Draven's masked face revealed nothing. Lady Celine, welcome. Please join us. The evening's revelations should prove memorable. Something flickered in Celine's eyes, suspicion warring with arrogance. But she ascended the dais, dragging Mirren with her, confident in her power. The ballroom doors opened again. Leora entered, flanked by Kale, Marcus, and Eldrick in full ceremonial armor. She wore a simple gray dress, no mask, no jewels, just her scarred face and defiant eyes. The nobles whispered behind their masks, shocked that a human servant would dare walk among them. Miss Leora Vale, Draven announced, his voice carrying across the hall. Accused of theft, corruption, and treason. Tonight, we settle these accusations. Publicly. Completely. Celine's smile was razor-sharp. How fitting. Let justice be served. Indeed. Draven gestured, and Marcus stepped forward with the memory crystal. Let us begin with evidence. The crystal activated, projecting images into the air above the assembled nobles. The hidden chambers appeared first, altars stained dark, walls carved with forbidden runes. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Then the mirror. The faces of children trapped in glass, their silent screams frozen for eternity. Several nobles cried out in recognition. That's Lord Corwin's daughter, someone whispered. She disappeared 3 years ago. Celine's journals materialized next, passages floating in letters of light. 17 children drained over 3 years. Their vitality sustains my beauty. The Veilborn child will complete the ritual. The ballroom erupted in horrified murmurs. These chambers were found beneath Lady Celine's private wing, Draven said, his voice cutting through the chaos. The journals are written in her hand. The rituals were performed with her magic. This is a fabrication. Celine's composure cracked. An elaborate lie constructed by this human who bewitched you. Then let the human speak. Draven gestured to Leora. Tell them what you endured. Leora stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. For 4 months, Lady Celine tormented me. She called me filth. She struck me where bruises wouldn't show. She sabotaged my work and threatened my position. The nobles listened, transfixed. When words failed to break me, she escalated. She planted evidence of theft. She bribed witnesses. She framed me for crimes I never committed. Leora's voice grew stronger. But her real target was never me, it was the children. Human children she saw as resources to fuel her vanity. She threatened Lady Mirren, Kale added, stepping forward. Multiple witnesses confirmed Celine cornered the child, grabbed her, warned her to stay silent about what she'd seen. Marcus continued, We found 17 sets of remains in the ritual chambers. 17 children from families without power to question their disappearance. Eldric's voice was hard as stone. And we found proof that Lady Celine planned to drain Lady Mirren tonight, to steal the vitality of a Veilborn protected child to amplify her dark magic. The ballroom descended into chaos. Nobles shouted accusations, demanded explanations, recoiled from Celine in horror. Lies! Celine shrieked. She yanked Mirren forward, claws extending toward the child's throat. All lies constructed by a Veilborn abomination who wants to destroy vampire supremacy. Let her go, Celine. Draven's voice was death itself. Or what? You'll strike me down before your court. Celine's eyes blazed crimson. I am beloved by the noble houses. I am beauty perfected. I am. You're a murderer of children. Leora's voice cut through Celine's ranting. And I'm not afraid of you anymore. Celine snarled and lunged, not at Mirren, but at Leora. Fangs extended, magic crackling around her claws. The attack never landed. Light erupted from Leora's skin, brilliant silver white that filled the ballroom like a star-going nova. Celine's dark magic shattered against it, dissolving like a shadow in sunlight. The vampire consort screamed, her perfect face contorting as the Veilborn power repelled her. Leora stood in the center of that radiance, her blood glowing through her veins like liquid moonlight, her eyes blazing with ancestral power that had slept for generations. Seize her. Draven's command cracked like a whip, his voice breaking with fury and grief and something else, awe at the woman standing fearless before his court. Seize Celine Varkos in the name of the crown. Kale, Marcus, and Eldric moved as one, silver chains in their hands, chains specifically forged to bind dark magic. Celine fought, but weakened by the Veilborn's radiance, she was no match. The nobles watched in stunned silence as the vampire who'd stood beside their king was dragged to her knees. Draven descended from his throne, removing his mask. His face was terrible in its controlled rage. Celine Varkos, you are hereby charged with the murder of 17 human children, the practice of forbidden blood magic, conspiracy to commit treason, and the corruption of this court's justice. Celine laughed, a broken, desperate sound. Do you think this changes anything? The nobles will never accept a human at your side. They'll accept justice. Draven's silver eyes swept across the assembled court. Or they'll answer for their complicity. The hall remained silent. One by one, the nobles bowed their heads, some in shame, some in fear, all in acknowledgement. Celine's reign collapsed in that silence, crumbling like ash in the wind. The ballroom slowly emptied as nobles filed out in subdued silence, their masks unable to hide the shock etched into ancient faces. Celine had been taken to the palace dungeons, her screams of protest fading into stone and shadow. Servants dismantled the extravagant decorations, and within an hour, only remnants of the masquerade remained. Wilted flowers, abandoned goblets, the faint echo of music that had celebrated a monster. Leora found Draven on the moonlit balcony overlooking the kingdom, his shoulders rigid with exhaustion. "Your Majesty." Her voice was soft, careful. "I wanted to thank you for everything and to submit my formal resignation." Draven turned sharply. "What?" "The court saw what I am tonight. A Veilborn, something they were taught to fear and hate." Leora clutched her hands together to stop their trembling. "I'm a symbol of everything that threatens their power. If I stay, I'll become a target for every noble who resented what happened to Selene. I'll put Mirren in danger. I'll put you in danger. So you'll run." His voice was flat, unreadable. "I'll survive. It's what I've always done."
No.
Draven crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. "I didn't just risk a civil war, so you could disappear into the night like you were the one who committed crimes. You risked a civil war because it was the right thing to do. I risked everything because I couldn't bear the thought of losing you." The confession escaped him raw and unguarded, shattering the careful distance he'd maintained. "Do you understand, Leora? When Selene took Mirren, when the council demanded your execution, when I saw you standing in that ballroom ready to sacrifice yourself again, I realized something terrifying." Leora's breath caught.
What?
"That somewhere between your defiance in the ballroom and your courage in the face of torture, I stopped seeing you as just a servant. I started seeing you as," he stopped, running a hand through his silver hair in frustration, "as someone irreplaceable. Someone whose loss would break something in me I didn't know could still break. Your Majesty." "Draven. Just Draven."
His voice softened.
"Please." "Draven," Leora whispered, testing the intimacy of his name on her tongue. "I'm a maid. A human. Someone who scrubs floors and changes linens. You're an immortal king who's lived for centuries. This, whatever this is, it's impossible." "Is it?" He reached out carefully, giving her time to pull away, and gently tilted her chin up. "You faced a vampire consort to protect a child. You endured months of torture without breaking. You stood before the entire court and spoke the truth that could have gotten you killed. You're the bravest person I've ever known, and I've known warriors and kings and legends." His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "Nothing about you is impossible. You're extraordinary." "I was afraid," Leora admitted, her voice cracking. "Every day, I was terrified you'd believe her over me. That you'd see me the way she did, as worthless, disposable, beneath your notice. I was blind, but never to your worth." Draven's expression is filled with regret. "I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner. That I let you suffer alone. You see me now. That's what matters." "Miss Leora." They turned to find Mirren racing across the balcony, tears streaming down her face. The child threw herself at Leora, who caught her and held her tight, both of them shaking with relief. "You're safe," Leora whispered into Mirren's hair. "You're safe now, little one. She hurt you. The mean lady hurt you again." Mirren pulled back, touching the faint bruises still visible on Leora's face. "But you glowed. You were so bright and beautiful, and she couldn't touch you. The Veilborn power protected me. It protected both of us." Footsteps announced the arrival of Kale, Marcus, and Eldrick. The 3 guards approached and, to Leora's shock, knelt before her. "Miss Leora Vale," Kale said formally, "we pledge our service to you as the first human to be publicly honored by the throne of Nocturnix. Where you go, we guard. What threatens you, we eliminate. This is our oath." I don't have any title." "You have courage," Marcus said simply. "That's enough." Eldrick smiled. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't try to resign every 5 minutes." Despite everything, Leora laughed, a surprised, genuine sound that seemed to lighten the heavy night air. Draven waited until the guards retreated a respectful distance, taking Mirren with them to give the adults privacy. Then he turned back to Leora, and the weight of unspoken feelings filled the space between them. "Stay," he said quietly. "Not as a servant. As my royal human liaison, a position I'm creating as of tonight. You'll advocate for human rights, reform working conditions, and ensure what happened with Celine never happens again. That's a political position. The nobles will. The nobles will accept it or face me. His voice hardened. I'm done allowing prejudice to dictate policy in my kingdom. Leora studied his face, the ancient eyes that had seen centuries, the expression vulnerable in a way she'd never witnessed. And if I stay, what are we? I don't know, Draven admitted. A king and his advisor. A vampire and a Veilborn. Two people who... He paused, and something like hope flickered across his features. Two people who might become something unprecedented. If you're willing to take that risk. I've been taking impossible risks since the moment I stepped between Celine and Mirren. Then what's one more? Leora reached out, her hand trembling, and touched his face, a gesture so bold, so intimate, it stole both their breaths. One more impossible thing, she whispered. Draven covered her hand with his, and in that touch, something shifted. Not a promise, not yet, but a possibility that felt like dawn breaking over a kingdom long shrouded in darkness. At sunrise, Celine Varkos was formally sentenced before a tribunal of the kingdom's highest judges. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict was unanimous. Exile to the Deadlands, a frozen wasteland beyond Nocturnix's borders where magic failed and survival was measured in days, not years. Stripped of title, power, and the stolen vitality that had sustained her beauty, she would face the wasteland as what she truly was, ancient, desperate, and alone. As the guards led her away, Celine's final words echoed through the throne room. You'll regret this, Draven. Both of you will. But no one was listening anymore. The monster's reign was over. The changes began immediately. Within a week of Celine's sentencing, Draven convened the High Council and presented the Human Rights Decree, a document that would reshape Nocturnix's social structure. Human servants could no longer be struck without consequence. They gained the right to report abuse without fear of retaliation. Working hours were limited, wages increased, and living quarters improved. The nobles protested, of course. Lord Vareth called it a dangerous precedent. Lady Corvina warned of human uprising. But Draven's response silenced them all. If our rule depends on cruelty, we deserve to fall. The decree passed, and with it, whispers of the vampire king who valued justice over tradition spread through the kingdom like wildfire. Leora's new office was a small chamber near the throne room, modest by noble standards, but luxurious compared to her former servants' quarters. A desk of polished darkwood, shelves for records and petitions, a window overlooking the moonlit gardens. Her first official act as royal human liaison was establishing a reporting system where humans could safely voice grievances. The responses flooded in, decades of suppressed complaints, fears, and traumas. Leora read each one, documented patterns, and brought the worst cases directly to Draven. Together, they worked late into countless nights, reforming policies that had stood unchanged for centuries. Vampire tradition isn't an excuse for barbarism, Draven said one evening, reviewing a particularly horrific report of a human child being used as a servant's training target. No, Leora agreed, making notes. But changing this fast will create enemies. Let them come. His silver eyes met hers. I have a Veilborn at my side now. I'm not afraid. She smiled despite herself. Careful, Your Majesty. People might think you actually like having me around. They'd be right. Mirren refused to leave Leora's side for the first month after Celine's exile. The child slept in Leora's quarters, accompanied her to meetings, and introduced herself to anyone who'd listen as Miss Leora's little sister. You saved me, Mirren said one afternoon as they walked the palace gardens. Like a hero from the old stories. I just did what anyone would.
No.
Mirren's voice was serious beyond her years. Most people would have stayed quiet. You were brave when it was scary. That's what makes you special. Leora pulled the child close, emotion tightening her throat. You make me braver than I am, little one. The palace scholars were fascinated by Leora's veil-born heritage. Ancient texts were retrieved from forgotten archives, describing abilities long thought extinct. Leora learned she could sense dark magic like a pulse against her skin. She could disrupt compulsion spells with focused will. And in moments of extreme emotion, her blood would glow with that silver light, a shield that protected not just herself, but anyone she chose to defend. Remarkable, breathed Master Aldrich, the chief scholar, watching Leora deflect a practice compulsion. The Veilborn weren't just immune, they were protectors. Natural guardians against corruption. Can I learn to control it? Leora asked. With training, yes. But the power responds to emotion, to conviction. It's tied to your heart as much as your blood. Leora thought of Mirren, of the terrified servant she now represented, of Draven working tirelessly beside her to heal centuries of injustice. Then my heart has plenty to protect. The court noticed everything. How the king sought Leora's counsel in public sessions. How he smiled at her observations in ways he smiled at no one else. How his gaze followed her when she left a room, lingering like he was memorizing her presence. The whispers spread. The human has bewitched him. The Veilborn has corrupted our king. He'll take her as consort next. Some nobles sneered. Others plotted. But a growing faction, younger vampires, progressives, those who'd been horrified by Celine's crimes, began to wonder, what if a human consort isn't corrupt? What if it's evolution? 3 months after the masquerade, Draven found Leora in her office long past midnight, surrounded by petitions and reports. You'll exhaust yourself, he said from the doorway. Says the king who hasn't slept in 48 hours. Fair point. He entered, closing the door behind him. Walk with me. There's something I want to show you. He led her through winding corridors to a spiral staircase she'd never noticed, hidden behind a tapestry, ascending into darkness. They climbed in comfortable silence until they emerged onto the highest balcony in the palace, a platform of white stone that seemed to float above the throne room far below. Nocturnix spread before them, a kingdom of moonlight and shadow, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. I come here when I need perspective, Draven said quietly. When the weight of the crown feels unbearable. It's breathtaking, yes. But he wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at her. Leora felt her breath catch. Draven. The nobles have been asking when I'll choose a new consort, he interrupted gently. They say a king without a queen beside him appears weak. Her heart sank. I see. I've told them I haven't found anyone worthy. He turned to face her fully, moonlight silvering his features. And it's the truth, not because worthy candidates don't exist, but because none of them are you. Leora's world tilted. What? You asked me once what we were. I didn't have an answer then. His voice was soft, vulnerable. But I have one now. We're two people who found each other in impossible circumstances. Who chose courage when fear would have been easier. Who are building something unprecedented together. He took her hands, his touch impossibly gentle. I know what the court whispers. I know what this means, the complications, the politics, the centuries of tradition we'd be shattering. His silver eyes held hers with fierce intensity. But Leora Vale, if ever I stand before this kingdom and name a queen to rule beside me, it won't be a vampire chosen for alliances or bloodlines. His voice dropped to a whisper, a vow meant only for her ears, in the quiet space above his kingdom where even the stars seemed to lean closer to listen. It will be you. Only you. The human who taught a king what true strength looks like. Leora's tears caught moonlight as they fell. That's the most impossible thing you've ever said. Then we'll make it possible. Together. And there, suspended between earth and sky, a king and a maid held each other while the kingdom slept below, unaware that its future was being rewritten in whispered promises and impossible hope. The vampire king had finally found his queen. She just didn't wear a crown yet.